Alright, on to part, the second one of his videos, the part 2. Sorry, I mean, really, this is a lot of shit, and if you're listening to it, I appreciate it. I mean, the counter-argument needs to be made, and it needs to be made, as explicitly as possible. Sorry, I'm not a morning person, and, but whatever. I'm wasting time, right? Fuck that shit.
Just an attack. That's just vicious, foaming at the mouth, third-grade name-calling. Okay, didn't invent a cure for cancer. Oh, yeah. Amentum is making all of these ridiculous statements, absolutely ludicrous. He's saying, what about all these Ford people and these Rothschild people and these rich people that inherited money? They never worked for it. They never cured cancer. They never built a transistor radio. Well, that's the most ridiculous fucking thing I've ever heard. Since when did...
yeah, well, well, let's see you defend this.
Since when do these people have to prove to you that they work hard by curing cancer?
Oh, come on. I mean, obviously it is I'm asking you to point out whether the human beings who are handed a bunch of money and spend their time on golf courses and yachts, I think everybody can figure out that they're not likely to be very productive human beings. All right? I think people can figure that the fuck out. All right? So look, we're talking about your defense of birthright. That's what this subject's about. It's about your defense of birthright. I'm defending productive workers. You're defending birthright. So get the fucking argument clear. Who's doing more productive work? Workers. Productive workers are people who are handed money at birth.
Or building a transistor radio. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing I have ever fucking heard. Now, it's true that some people that inherit money are lazy and are bums. That's a part of the system. But most of them actually have to go to work and run the empire.
No, they don't. You're saying again using this word, most of them. No, they have a whole financial industries that they depend on. These there's names for them. These people, these financial manager people. So don't play that game. Most of the wealth is just stuff in an account. It's their pile of goddamn surplus. It's their ownership of a big pile of blood, sweat, and sacrifice that they control and that they expect to grow and reproduce without them having to lift a motherfucking finger. And you know as well as I do is that if you diversify a fortune sufficiently, you can extract all but the most unusual of catastrophes from ever affecting you.
Run the business, or else it gets lost, it gets squandered. A lot of fortunes do get squandered by...
Well, that doesn't do anything to the argument. The fact that a lot gets squandered, just as many end up being, well, look, here's $10 million in New York real estate in 1965. I mean, it's pretty hard to fail under that circumstance. Pretty hard to fail with $10 million in New York real estate in 1965. I mean, I don't know exactly how you could possibly do it unless you burned your own buildings down.
Their heirs. The arguments are so ridiculous as to be laughable. As if Henry Ford's heirs are evil and awful because they inherited a lot of money from Henry Ford and didn't cure cancer or invent the...
No, look, the concept is that inheritance in itself is evil and awful social policy. It's completely destructive to a real free market. It's completely destructive to human productivity. It creates colossal waste in our system. Colossal waste.
Transistor radio. None of these things follow. It's called non sequitur. Thank you. It's called a non sequitur. None of these things follow.
Yeah, so it doesn't follow. So you can talk about incentives and all this other crap for working people, and you think it's really important that they have incentives to improve themselves, but somehow you don't think the wealthy have to have incentives. They can just be handed all the carrots, have a free supply of carrots, and they're going to be something other than a little Hilton bitch. Is that your argument? No, I think I can make the argument that they're more likely to be the classic playboy and the classic, debutante, brainless twat.
I mean, just the mere act of managing the fortune is work in and of itself, right there.
Yeah, you can laugh about it like it's work, like it's really hard work, and it's not. And like I said, there's professionals that most of them hire. So it's a stupid, irrelevant, and mindless and idiotic argument.
And I would say the percentage of the rich, I mean, I guess he's talking about the ultra rich, who just sit there and don't do anything. It's probably so.
Well, why don't you define what these numbers are? I mean, if you're going to use these jackass numbers, I said the top 5%. You want to go to the top 3%? That's okay with me too. All right? So you just tell me, where's this ultra number start? And that's what we're talking about. Yeah, fine.
Minuscule who don't work. You know, like Arthur, remember the movie Arthur? So minuscule. That's not even, why is that a problem?
Well, what? So you think the emirs of Iraq or Saudi Arabia work? You really do. You really think that the people who get a paycheck from the oil revenue and, a free paycheck every year, that they work? That's really how you think. You're really that fucking stupid. What they do is they're such hard workers that when somebody invaded their country, not one of them could pick up a gun to defend their country, right? Because their entire country was being run by foreign labor. I mean, fuck you. Idiotic argument.
We're talking about such a tiny percentage of people. There's a lot of people who are poor.
Yeah, it's a tiny percentage that owns the world, that owns the majority of the substance on this planet, and they're going to own even more after this catastrophe because they're the ones that hold all these fucking IOUs made out of fucking bullshit money.
Who don't work, who have inherited $2 or $3 from their parents and are still just as lazy as some of the Ford heirs.
Right, and you think those poor people, those lazy poor people, deserve to live in a cardboard box. Well, how come the lazy rich don't deserve to live in a cardboard box? I don't get you. So it's not the laziness that bothers you. It's obviously where they're born from. If you're born from poor people, you deserve to be living in a cardboard box. But if you're born to rich people, you deserve not to live in a cardboard box. Even though you're identical people by character, somehow you think that makes sense. And you think that's the way society should see it too. Society should see it that way. It should say, let's see your blood count, and then we'll decide what kind of human being you are and how you should live. But we won't pay attention to your character. We won't pay attention to your contribution. We'll just judge you based on your genetics. Yeah, go ahead, make that argument, jackass.
So laziness is, you know, a lot of families have lazy people in them, whether they're rich or poor. So again, ridiculous, stupid arguments.
Yeah, it's ridiculous and stupid to make like an analogy, like you're having a three-legged race at the park and your family goes out there and you know 6 of the contestants are halfway down the track and 3 or 3/4 of the way down the track and 2 of them are about 10 feet from the starting line, and then you and your little child are going to sit there way back at the real starting line, at the finish line I meant to say, and you're gonna say, hey, this is a fair fight, this will be a fun race. And yeah, Junior will love it because, you know, we have absolutely no chance here.
He goes, and Mendham goes on to talk about the life expectancy, because capitalism, of course, according to Mendham's model, is evil.
No, look, I was talking about the life expectancy of the people we exploit, and that's just a fact. We use people's lives up all over the world. So this is going to be real. I should skip this shit, but I'll just throw it in here.
And poor workers and child labor in China and India and Venezuela and a bunch of other countries will reduce the life expectancy of people. Actually, the truth is that modern capitalist state societies have increased life expectancy more than any other system in human history.
That is just such bullshit. I mean, the fact that industrialization and wealth enhances life expectancy is a no fucking brainer. But that was already starting to happen back in Benjamin Franklin's day. It's just a silly argument. I mean, a preposterously silly argument. We're talking about the net. What's the net effect? I mean, obviously, there's probably lots of Chinamen who live to be 85 or 90 or, maybe longer. All right, but the point is a big substance of the population gets killed pretty young. Through this attrition of the capitalist system that's exploiting them.
The industrialized West lived well into our 80s and 90s.
Yeah, well, that's like I said, because we don't have, go back to the day when we had migrant workers working in sweatshops in New York City. All right, and then talk to me about the average lifespan, because it was diminished based on the fact that we were exploiting people domestically here. All right, now we're exploiting people all around the world. So of course we've eradicated, just because we moved the cholera off to some other country doesn't mean the cholera doesn't exist anymore, asshole.
Some of us even to our hundreds, which has never been heard of throughout human history. No, it is true.
It doesn't have a goddamn thing to do with capitalism. It has to do with human progress. And human progress has to do with a lot of investment made by human beings. Some of the greatest scientists who did the best things for our health and welfare worked for the fucking state. So what's your explanation for that? They were completely state-funded health organizations that financed their research and development. So what the fuck are you talking about? You lose on this argument.
When a country gets started switching over to a capitalist system, there are abuses like child labor and poor workers being exploited, and that certainly does need to be addressed. But that period doesn't usually last that long. All
right, so what? Are you saying that China is a capitalist country now? Is that what you're saying? It's not our capitalism exploiting them. They're actually a capitalist system, and their capitalist system is just immature. Is that your argument now? That they're not really commies anymore?
It's the whole argument for globalization. As, let's say, that China... well, first of all, you'll notice that China and Venezuela and Cuba, or whatever some of the other... countries you mentioned aren't capitalists. They're socialists.
Yeah, well, I didn't mention Cuba, and actually Cuba does very, very well, considering, like I said, if you made some fair comparisons between their health care, their longevity, and ours, they'd come off pretty good considering how poor they are. So, I mean, if the Americans were as poor as the Cubans are, we wouldn't be living as long either. You have to concede that without our MRIs and our medications and all the rest of the crap that we have, the advantages that we have, we wouldn't be living as long. I think you know that, right? You really must know that.
Those are socialist, communist, Marxist states exploiting children and poor workers and making them work too long and not paying them enough. That's not capitalist, frankly.
I'm sorry, it is capitalist. You're going to tell me it's something other than capitalists who are taking advantage of the people in China? That's something other than the capitalists paying the Chinese to whip their employees? I mean, look, and it's not even that indirect anymore. I mean, the actual companies are in the fucking country. I mean, the automobile manufacturers and the rest of them, they have their name on the fucking plant in the fucking country. So let's not play this idiotic game.
So you just made an argument for capitalism and against socialism and communism. Thank you very much. But in globalization, here's how it goes. Let's say the third world developing country, for a while it will be pretty rough. So the theory goes, and this has been pretty well proven. This is what happened to America and Britain and other countries. But then as the country climbs out of development and third worldness, gradually things get better and better for the workers, and it's kind of a trickle down thing.
Yeah, no, it never trickles down. We just find somebody else to exploit. All right, and that's just that obvious. We can see it throughout our history. We exploited slaves, then we exploited the migrants, and then we said, well, where are we going to go now? And so then we started going to South America in the 60s and 70s, and now we pointed our little target at China, and the rest of the world decided, let's take advantage of them. We can see it lives on exploitation. It lives on profiting from deprivation, from extracting a profit out of that emotion, out of that feeling, out of that need. All right, and that's all it is.
This is the argument for globalization, capitalist globalization, is that eventually things do improve in the country, but at first, yeah, there's problems, and they need to be addressed.
Yeah, well, whatever. Like I said, your argument is completely lame, because I'm sure you'd call most of those European countries over there socialist, and their standard of living is higher than ours. So your argument, if you're going to go based on that idiotic standard, their system is better than our system. I would argue that it's not, and it's not for a lot of reasons, but that's a whole different fucking subject.
Capitalism is by no means perfect, and I don't think anyone will argue that it is.
Well, I think you're arguing pretty absolutist nonsense, okay? Because anybody who challenges one little tiny little piece of your little capitalist bullshit gets this kind of nonsense as a reply.
But it doesn't stay that way forever.
Well, I was just saying, point to the decade where we were treating the human race right, where the capitalists were in complete harmony with humanity. Point to me. Well, point it. Point. Use your finger and point to it.
Is the argument. Capitalism was really bad and brutal when it first started in America, in England, and in France and Germany, and that's when Karl Marx came of age, and he looked around and he saw this was awful. People were being made to work 16, 18 hours a day in these smoky, filthy environments.
Oh, come on, that's still going on. So this is a stupid conversation.
They were given peanuts. They weren't paid very well, and they broke arms and legs, and they weren't given breaks or anything like that, and it was really a cruel system.
Right, and they live in cardboard boxes, and their kids die of diarrhea because the sewage is outside the front door. I mean, it's happening right now in Mexico. It's happening right now in China. So what are you talking about? This isn't 200 years ago. It's now.
And so capitalism had some real growing pains to go through, but and then we're seeing that in China and other places, that there's some real growing pains that need to be addressed and developed and need to be helped along. Because, yeah, it needs to be made humane.
Yeah, and how's it going to do that? How exactly is it going to do that with people like you and with your rhetoric? Your rhetoric isn't going to change any of that shit. My rhetoric is.
Especially in areas where it isn't. But you'll see that eventually workers did attain rights eventually in these places like America, Britain, and Europe.
Right, and they got them. They had it pretty good for a decade, and then Reagan got elected with his crayon drawings, and everything's downhill from there. And we will now pay for it. Reagan was the Antichrist. They can talk about Obama and all these. No, Reagan was it. Reagan was the doom, the harbinger of doom. Because he wrote the prescription for the demise of capitalism, and unfortunately, the alternative isn't going to be socialism or communism. It's going to be feudalism.
Because of things like free speech and the right to organize and protest and the court system, the redress system, the things did improve, and we need to encourage that throughout the world.
Yeah, how do you do that? How exactly does your political ideology spend a breath doing that?
Just because there are problems with the system doesn't mean we just throw it out and institute a far worse, more brutal system such as communism or socialism.
And who's advocating that? I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating a different system of rewards that puts limits on the top and the bottom. You want to call that socialism, you want to call that communism, and so, well, it's your prerogative, but at least let's just get the definition straight.
Which has been proven to be horrible to human beings. I mean, far worse than anything capitalism has ever done.
Well, exactly. So you're just going to straw man me so grotesquely. There's just no what the fuck can I do with it? It's you put it right there. You straw man. You do this thing. You tear down something else that has nothing to do with anything I'm advocating. So what? I have to defend the Soviet Union now? Fuck you. Silly. Defend Nazi Germany, asshole. Capitalism is Nazi Germany. So okay, defend Nazi Germany or you lose the argument.
Mao Zedong, what's his name, Stalin, Lenin, killed hundreds of millions of people, just to mention a few.
Yeah, a country in revolution, people get killed. That's what happens. That's right. The French Revolution killed not millions, but you know they did do it creatively and with style.
So yes, there are problems, and they need to be addressed, and they are. But again, the thing is. Capitalist societies, when they're first starting out, do have these imbalances.
Yeah, well, when do we get past the starting out period? I mean, we're still exploiting people all over the world. So when do we refine our capitalism? When do we get around to maturing it?